Coming up next on Tech News Today, we round out this week's crop of episodes taking a look back on 2016. This time, we're going to focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've got some awesome guests lined up, awesome topics, and a crazy look into the future of AI in this episode of Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1673, recorded Wednesday, December 21st, 2016, for Friday, December 30th, 2016.
Welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we talk about everything you need to know about technology. And it is a holiday week. We are at home sleeping, eating, opening presents, skiing, who knows. But you, if you're listening, you're going to hear all week the biggest.
Or you will have
already. You will have already heard. You will have already heard the biggest stories of the year. And today we're talking about the biggest artificial intelligence stories of the year, or machine learning. If you want to not be afraid of the robot overlords, we call it machine learning.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent all week kind of looking at different facets of technology threads that have really permeated, to the surface throughout the course of 2016. I feel like artificial intelligence is like, if it's not at the top, it's very close to the top, because the beginning of the year, it was this thing that was kind of neat because it was winning games, challenging Go players and everything. And by the end, it was, oh my goodness, everyone is in artificial intelligence, and it's a major part of their plan going forward. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to talk about today. No doubt about it. Artificial intelligence had a major coming out party throughout 2016, became a household name in many ways, moved from this thing we saw coming in the future to this thing that is consuming all aspects of technology, and that momentum will only progress. Joining us to talk about why AI is such a force right now is Alex Kantrowitz from Buzzfeed. How's it going, Alex?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We've had you on throughout the course of the year. We really appreciate you taking time to talk with us throughout the year. And then, of course, today, diving into artificial intelligence. So AI isn't a new concept by any means. This year really feels like the year AI became critical to technology. Why now?
Well, I think before we jump in and say that AI is going to do great things, it's important to remember the history, which is that throughout the past 60 years where AI has been at least conceivable in science, you've seen it go back and forth between being something that's going to change the world and solve all our problems to being bunk science. And it has these cycles where it gets hyped and then eventually gets given up on because it can't deliver on the promises. And the come downs have been really difficult for this field. They've been called AI winters. And basically what that's like is, imagine you're in an NFL team. You go from practice squad to the Super Bowl, you win the Super Bowl, and then your skills just aren't that good enough to make the team the next year, and you're stocking groceries, a few months later. And that's what's happened to a lot of AI scientists and a lot of this research, where it's gone from, hey, this thing is going to change the world, to, oh, we're not really sure, and then 10 years of nothing until it starts to come back up again. And right now we're in one of those cycles where it seems like this is really moving. But we should approach it with a little bit of caution, I think.
I mean, do you feel like this is different from the highs and the lows of the past? Like, is computing at a point? I mean, I feel like in many ways we're starting to see this kind of interplay in things in magical ways, right? Like Google Photos, for example, can analyze all of your photos, and instead of having to do this manual tagging on the back end as a user, it just automatically knows that that's a poodle when you type in a search for poodle, and it does that. So as a user, we're starting to see the impact of AI in the things that we're using. Does that kind of elevate AI this time around to be, even more effective than it has been in the past?
Yes, definitely. So with the requisite word of caution now out of the way, I think we can start to talk about some of the advances we've seen. Certainly, there's been increases in computing power, and data has proliferated to the point where some of the methods that people used to think were bunk are now starting to work. It's actually pretty exciting to watch some scientists who have, been relegated to the sidelines of the field now come to the forefront, because the methodology they believed in their entire lives, is finally proving itself to be valid. Right. And I think one of the key things here, and you touched on it, is that in the past few years, we've seen computers really get an opportunity to see. So maybe 5 years ago, computers were completely blind. But with advances in image recognition, artificial intelligence, a computer can now pick out, look at a picture or even a video and start picking out, okay, well, that's a person, and that's a house, and that's a car, and that's a street, and that's the sky. And this means that computers now can really take a look at the environment around them. And I think that that's going to have, big implications. We're already seeing it on the streets of Pittsburgh and San Francisco, where cars are starting to drive themselves around now because they can actually see what's going on.
Wow.
So I know you cover a lot of social media, and it feels like a lot of AI sort of is sneaking into social media. A lot of the AI training, we're sort of training AI with our social media, feeding all these photos to Google Photos or to Facebook. And, it's nice. It's nice when when someone's already recognized in our Facebook photos and we don't have to look through. It's nice to not have to tag all our photos. But do you ever feel like it's a little bit insidious the way all of this machine learning is being given to us through our social media?
Look, I personally like the fact that, these networks are using machine learning. To me, it makes the experience better. And, before I start, raising my hand and saying, don't do this, like if I appreciate it day to day as a user, I'm pretty happy. Now, I will say, if you think it's insidious now, buckle your seatbelt, because these companies have ambitions that scale way beyond where we are today. I mean, I know the stated hope of Facebook, and I'm pretty sure the stated hope of Google is to create machines that can think and are on par with human intelligence. Now, we're far away from that, but this is, if they get to where they want to be, then this is really just the beginning.
And so, I mean, we really are. It's true that I use all this a lot. I enjoy the fact that Facebook knows what I want to see in my feed and what I don't want to see, but it still feels like, I want to express this specific emotion. So this year, of course, we got all the range of emotions in Facebook that we could give. And, when someone's dog is in the hospital, I don't want to like the photo. I want to be sad. But Facebook is using all of those intricate emotions that I'm showing to do what?
Well, I mean, it's definitely studying them, and the newsfeed is run based off of AI, and Align, that one of the head of Facebook's applied machine learning team, which is the people that actually put the artificial into place. And Facebook is fond of saying is that Facebook today wouldn't exist without artificial intelligence. And I think that they see it as a competitive advantage. And we're really just going to get to the point. Here, let me just give an example. So last week, Facebook started testing this thing called M suggestions, where within Messenger, the AI is reading your conversations and then suggesting stickers that you'll respond to what people are telling you. Now, in order to suggest the appropriate stickers, think about how difficult the problem is for your artificial intelligence. It has to contextually understand the conversations and then suggest something that would be an appropriate response and you might actually want to use. And by the way, I have them suggestions on my phone. These stickers are pretty good. So, look, I'm not complaining because I love using stickers in Messenger. And if it can suggest 4 appropriate ones to pop in there and I'll pick one, I'm happy about that. There you go. So I think that, companies are using this data in all different ways. In many ways, there's no way to really opt out. But again, I think that generally, if you're concerned about the user experience, it's only going to be more fun and exciting to use these platforms moving forward.
Yeah, so that kind of segues into another topic that we have here, which is just basically the fact that AI is reaching the hands of general users in many ways, largely, partially what you're talking about with Facebook M, but digital assistants, chatbots, Google's Assistant, Apple Siri, Amazon's Alexa, Microsoft's Cortana, all of these things hinging on the benefits and the power of AI. Apparently, tech companies really want us to be talking to our devices like they're humans. Based on what we've seen this year, is this what users seem to want for themselves? Is this kind of answering a need that users have, and is it effective?
Okay, that's a good question. First, let me start by saying one of the interesting things about seeing these companies put their artificial intelligence into play into the form of user assistance or just entertainment chatbot is we're getting to see them experiment and fail in real time.
Yeah.
One of the things that these chatbots need to work is a significant amount of data. You can't just dog food entertainment chatbot in-house and get it to work the way you want it. You need massive amounts of conversations. And we saw Microsoft stumble on that when they put out Tay, their AI bot. You saw it go from something that they had worked internally and no one was pushing it to the edge to something that the users really broke. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the first user responses for all of us is, or not all of us, but a good chunk of the population is, let's try to break these things. It's certainly what happened with me when I had Facebook M. My number one goal was to try to break it and see how much work I could give it before it finally said mercy. And so far it's still talking to me amazingly.
Yeah.
But I think that we're seeing really interesting experiments happen. Now, whether users need it or not, look, I can tell you that if it's done right, people won't look back. Let me tell you one story, and then I'll let you ask your next question. Yeah. I was on the way to the airport to get home for Thanksgiving from San Francisco, and I had a connecting flight in Philadelphia. It was raining out, and my flight from San Francisco to Philly was delayed, meaning I'd missed a flight to New York and wouldn't make it home in time to see my family. So I'm heading to the airport, and I just send M the screenshot of the Google results that say this flight's delayed, and I say, hey, can you get in touch with the airline and see if you can do something about this? And then I wrote another message, maybe get me on a direct flight from San Francisco to New York. 10 minutes later, M had booked me on a flight direct from San Francisco to New York, made it home on time. Everything worked out. Who would have known what would have happened if I would have had to, made the call, and it obviously would have caused me a lot of frustration. I wouldn't have done it any other way.
Yeah.
Now that I know that this is available. Is it all AI? Definitely not. But there's a chance that it could get there, and that's going to be exciting for a lot of people if that happens.
It automatically booked your flight?
Well, look, I mean, if you think about the back end of these systems right now, there's a lot of human involvement. So what's happening is the humans the M is going to get the requests from users. Then it will suggest its own response. And then humans on the back end will either accept that response and push it along to a user, or they will write their own response. And when they write their own response and when they do their own action, M learns. So the idea is that if this is something that enough people ask M to do, there's a chance that Facebook could automate it, plug into American Airlines, which is the airline I flew, plug into their back end systems. And then this is something that could become standard for a lot of users. Are we a year away, 2 years, 5 years away from that? Who knows? But it clearly shows you the type of stuff that Facebook wants to do with it. And if it's able to make that happen, trust me, I'm not saying no to that. And neither are a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess the challenge there is reminding people that that is actually a possibility. That is something that they can think to do when they're in that situation. If I was in that situation, I'm not sure that I would have automatically thought, well, I'll turn to Facebook M and see if M can deal with this for me. I'd be feeling like I needed to control the situation myself. So you're putting a lot of trust and faith into the system to work for you. It's awesome that it worked out that way. Another recurring thread throughout the year has been kind of the harsh reality that sure, AI is the realization of the kind of the maturity of technology and development in many ways, but that comes at the cost of jobs as computers become more equipped to mimic and replace the work of humans. Even the White House just released a report saying that AI will result in economic growth, but at the expense of millions of lower skilled jobs. Alex, how quickly will this sort of threat to jobs materialize? Are we already starting to see this? How big a deal in the short term?
I was at a panel discussion in San Francisco about how quickly AI is going to remove jobs. And one of the things one of the panelists said that stuck with me is that AI, most technology has a horizon, right? So you hear about a technology that's going to come, and then the horizon for when it gets released keeps getting moved back and back and back. So you think that this thing is going to come. All right, no, it's going to happen 6 months from now. No, it's going to happen a year from now, and maybe 2 years from now. Mm-hmm. The thing about AI is that the horizon just gets closer and closer and closer. You say, all right, self-driving cars will happen in 7 years. No, it's going to happen in 5 years. No, it will happen in 2 years. Okay, all of a sudden you have cars driving themselves around the streets of San Francisco and Pittsburgh today. So I think that this stuff could happen really quickly. Again, AI has been through enough hype cycles that we know that as soon as you say it's going to happen tomorrow, that's probably when the field starts to go down. But look, I think that this could happen. This could happen quickly. Yeah. You're going to see it, especially in the case of self-driving trucks. Truck drivers are like truck driving is the number one occupation in, I think, over 20 states in the United States. So that's going to be a big deal if you can start to automate that. What are those truck drivers going to do? We also saw Amazon Go, which is a supermarket that supposedly uses AI to check you out. Well, there's millions of jobs. I think it's the number one employer, again, across many states and maybe even the U.S. Retail salespeople. So if you think about that, if AI can check you out that way, that's going to cause another wave of major job loss. And everybody says this is just part of the history of economics. When you have technology that comes in and automates jobs, then the economy might have short-term pain, but long-term gain. Everything necessarily adjusts. This is pretty unprecedented technology. It's not like anything that came before it. So for me personally, I'm sort of thinking, well, I know what history tells us, but how can you really be sure here? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a degree in economics at this point too, because it really feels like, we at one point we moved from an agrarian society to an industrial society, and now we're moving from an industrial society to an information society. So it's not just about automating jobs; it's a completely different society that we're going to be living in. And when we talked about Amazon Go, one of the things that we brought up was not just the fact that some grocery checkers would be losing their jobs, because for sure that's going to happen, but also the idea that you would maybe need a smartphone to be able to shop in this grocery store, just like the economic level of the haves and have-nots. And I feel like I see that more and more with AI. Like it's awesome that you could get your flight booked in your smartphone. And I also part of me wonders whether they know that you're testing. You're part of a beta test in this, and they know, well, if we get Alex Kantrowitz from Buzzfeed on that plane, like he's going to talk about it on Buzzfeed, and it's going to be but whether all of that AI will be available across the world, and it won't just be a digital divide, but it'll be a little bit of an AI divide.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I will say that I find this all very interesting because my degree is in labor relations, which is something I never thought would actually start to come into play as a tech reporter, but now it's becoming more and more important. In terms of whether there's going to be an AI divide, look, I think that all technology is going to create, it's going to shake up the economy in a way and society, and start to mess with the structure. We already know that automation, globalization, which has largely happened on the back of the internet, has led to an increase in income inequality across the world. So I think you can't discount that. The one thing I will say is that for many people, Facebook is the internet. Many people across the world, their view of the internet is Facebook, for better or for worse. And so if you're starting to see these developments happen inside Facebook, it actually might end up, being in the hands of the most people possible, just because of how widely used it is.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you, I think this is kind of the last question, then we can let you go. You recently tweeted, I think it was last night even, that in 2017, artificial
tweets.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I saw this. I wanted to ask you about it. Artificial intelligence, you said, will start showing itself in big ways in the stuff that we use every day. And I think throughout the course of this interview, you talked a little bit about. But explain your thinking behind this tweet and what you expect to see in 2017.
Yeah, I'm basing that off of things like Suggestions and Google Assistant, which you'd imagine is going to make its way into more products than just Google Allo, which is kind of this, backwater messaging app that nobody uses. Mm-hmm. I think that as we start to see, artificial intelligence make its way into our messaging apps specifically, it's going to become more apparent to people than it was before. That's what I thought. I wrote that tweet a day after I had Suggestions start popping into my conversations on Messenger. And yeah, I have but when I start using Suggestions, it became way more apparent that this thing is going to, really be, present in ways that it wasn't before. So add the AI's presence in messaging apps to self-driving cars and trucks, which will likely expand big time in 2017. And all of a sudden, it's going to go from abstract to concrete for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. Going from this like weird kind of behind the scenes technology that supposedly is doing a lot of things to something that you rely on to a certain degree or you interact with. And we've already seen a lot of that in 2016 with the digital assistants and everything like that. But yeah, more of an awareness around what exactly is providing that benefit to you as a user. Awesome stuff, Alex. Always appreciate you coming on the show, and thanks for taking a chunk of your morning out to talk with us about artificial intelligence today. Alex Kantrowitz, of course, Buzzfeed.com. Where can people follow your work online, your social, all that?
Yeah, I think it's right up there on the screen. You can follow me on Twitter at Kantrowitz, and happy to talk over there. If you didn't like what I said, let's fight it out.
Excellent. Or if you like it, give them props. Alex, thank you so much. Awesome work, and we'll talk to you in 2017.
Great. Thanks for having me. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too. And shut down. Thanks again, Alex.
Oh, my pleasure. This was fun.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Awesome insights. And have a great holiday.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. We should do this again next year and see if it actually made a bigger impact or less.
Yeah. Totally. It's awesome checking in a year later on predictions that you have going forward and be like, wow, I was either really wrong or really right.
Absolutely.
We'll do that.
Did the audio come out okay? I have the headphones that you guys sent me, but if I don't need to use them, I'm just gonna.
Right. Because that would mess up your hair.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, it was great. Yeah. It was audio. Okay. It was great.
Yeah.
And so have you checked out Goat Z yet? The zombie goat simulator?
What? There goes my day.
Yeah, there's a whole like theme of goat simulator apps.
You got it's goat with a Z. Apparently, there's some. If you say goat, that I don't even know what it is, and I don't want to. I've been told not to Google it.
No. I'm really amazed at the amount of people who are so passionate about Goat Simulator. It's really unbelievable.
It's kind of a thing.
It gives me faith for humanity.
Yes.
Yeah, it really does. Me too.
Absolutely. Have fun playing that. Thanks again, Alex.
All right. Thanks. Yeah. Always a pleasure.
Have a great holiday. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Now, there's the hope that artificial intelligence would somehow rise above our human dark sides and be better, maybe make society less biased, less sexist, less racist, less anti-Semitic. But so far, we're still a long way from that. Joining us to talk about machine bias is Selena Larson from CNN Money. Welcome, Selena.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going good. So we touched on the racist chatbot Tay, but you've written extensively on the topic of gender and racial bias in AI. Let's start with some of the research this summer that says Google's speech recognition software just has a gender bias. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that was research actually conducted based on audio from YouTube. So a researcher was running speech recognition software against a bunch of clips that she had pulled from YouTube. And what she found was the speech recognition was way more consistent when it was analyzing male voices versus female voices. What she had hypothesized was maybe these things are being trained on mostly male voices, not from a necessarily diverse set of speakers. And Google says that they do train all of their voice recognition on with men and women with different languages and different accents. But what she's found is that it's still skewed towards recognizing men better than women.
And so we're still in a learning curve phase, I guess. I mean, as we mentioned, Microsoft came out with the chatbot at the very beginning of the year. People broke it immediately. But then they came out with a new one that they just put on Kick and not Twitter. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's going?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting that they pivoted from Twitter, which is just, a very public and open platform, and anybody could use her, chat with her and use the service, and, have these kind of conversations and effectively train her to become racist or say mean things or, be kind of snippy or sarcastic. So what they did was they pivoted towards Kik, which is a messaging platform popular with young people. And she's supposed to be, a millennial, a hip millennial that talks with the teens and the young people that's on Kik. And what that does is it sort of prevents this piling on of the public platform that is Twitter for people that are like, oh, I'm going to mess with this chatbot. I'm going to make her try and make her say bad things and turn her into something that she wasn't necessarily meant to be. So by doing this on a much smaller scale, Microsoft can better understand how people are engaging with her. They do identify it as a young woman. And better train her to recognize and understand when someone's saying something mean or inconsiderate or racist or anti-Semitic, anything like that. And so they're going to take these learnings and apply them to a lot more of the AI stuff that they're doing at Microsoft. And so using this like smaller scale is going to provide, I think, a little bit more granular data, and they won't have sort of the skewing of, all of these people piling on to make her say terrible things.
So, a big kind of other thread outside of just AI and just involving technology in general throughout the year has been this very important idea of being more inclusive behind the scenes so that the products that are created and that hit the consumer's hands actually are representative of all of these different perspectives, different minds, different backgrounds, everything like that. It all starts from how it's created on the back end. And what we also know about AI is that in some ways, there's a very limited talent pool of people who are brilliant minds in the world of AI. Do you think that's kind of part of what we're seeing here, that just the overall talent pool is so small around AI that it's hard to make it as inclusive as it needs to be?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. That's kind of a similar argument to, the pipeline being a reason for why there are so few women and minorities in tech. But, you see that research has been done that there are more women and minority students that are graduating from some of the top schools in computer science than are getting hired by tech companies. So I don't think that there's necessarily a dearth of talent per se. I think it's really just about continuing to advocate and being aware and, thinking about how you're building these tools and how they can impact people. And also not only that, but it's not necessarily like the people that are creating artificial intelligence or who are needed to build these systems. It's not just engineers, right? You have to think of, for example, the woman who did the research was a linguist. So you have to think of maybe these different skills, whether it's language or psychology or sociology, to realize how these tools are going to be used and implemented. And so it's not just, technical people who are going to be building these tools and these systems, but it's people across the board who have wide breadths of knowledge that you might not be aware of that are going to be building these systems. So it's really important to tap into that talent as well.
So law enforcement is beginning to use computer algorithms to catch criminals, but there's bias there too. Apparently we didn't learn a thing about the dangers of pre-crime and future crime from Minority Report. In May, you wrote about a ProPublica investigation that talked about the questions used in these algorithms that law enforcement use. You wrote that they weren't racially based questions, but that questions like how many of your friends or acquaintances have ever been arrested, or how often do you have conflicts with teachers at school, those inherently make the machine learning biased. What can you tell us about that?
So it was a really interesting study that they did about something called risk assessment, which is something that law enforcement does for judges when they're sentencing somebody. And they run this risk assessment to figure out when they or the likelihood of committing a future crime. And so, like you were explaining, they pull from all sorts of Q&As and data sets, and it's basically kind of a quiz. But what researchers found was it was biased against African Americans and consistently showed that African American folks were having a higher likelihood of committing a future crime, even though the data showed that that wasn't true. So it was, again, this kind of goes back to these biased systems that are being built. And because people intrinsically have bits of ourselves, right? Like humans, when they're building artificial intelligence, humans are behind it. It's not a perfect system. And you're building in these biases and these things that you inherently have into these systems. And so I thought it was a pretty bombshell report and shed a lot of light into the law enforcement system and how, these things that we think of are these, perfect antidotes or things that we can use aren't necessarily entirely correct. And it was a pretty big wake-up call.
Mm-hmm. So let's also talk about AI in healthcare. There was a few months ago, Chinese search engine Baidu launched a chatbot called Melody to help doctors treat patients through text messages. And you wrote about this on CNN. What are your thoughts on Melody?
I think it's a really interesting use case. So AI in healthcare is obviously an exploding field. We have Watson, who's doing a lot of work in oncology in different hospitals around the world. The IBM supercomputer that can pull all this information. So Baidu uses Melody. It's kind of a similar AI system that just looks through pages and pages of research and compares information about different cases to what doctors are currently dealing with. So, you can kind of get a quote unquote consultation with Melody. You can tell her all of your symptoms, the kind of things that you're experiencing. And the software behind Melody will run an analysis on all of these pieces of data and then provide what it thinks might be what's wrong with you. And then, of course, because it's, you can't get diagnosed from a robot, it will send it to a actual doctor. And then the doctor will read through the transcript and see, this is what I think. Melody was actually correct. Here's a form of treatment, or, maybe this is one instance Melody could have seen, but here's another the potential thing that's wrong with you. So it is this like human computer pairing, I think, which is pretty interesting. And we'll probably see more of that in the future.
Yeah, we're already in some ways starting to see this. Google Home very recently opened up their list of partners, and one of their partners, of course, is WebMD. And you can imagine from a conversational aspect of these kind of home AI systems that people are interacting with, when WebMD is built into it, that's almost entirely about self-diagnosis, right? And people have warned for years consistently, like it's probably not a good idea to use the internet to self-diagnose. You can fall down a rabbit hole, you can follow the wrong trail, think you've got one thing when you actually don't, and the power shouldn't necessarily rest in your hands. It should rest in the hands of someone who actually knows and can understand all this data. Is this more evolved than that, would you say?
I would say definitely. I think, when you're looking through WebMD, you're searching, you're looking at all these symptoms, you see, this could be me. Like, why don't I just click on this? Like, this might be a thing that I'm experiencing. And then you kind of get in your head of, oh my gosh, like, is this actually happening? But with Melody, it's like the AI is sourcing research papers. It's sourcing all types of documentation and textbooks and actually clinical information. And it's a computer that is making these steps. And, where you would be like clicking on like, you're going to die tomorrow. Melody or the software behind the chatbot is going to be scouring the web for you on your behalf for things that you wouldn't otherwise look at.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the biggest problem in medicine today is not the lack of data, but how to get that data to doctors, right? There's so much to know. We've done so much research that doctors used to be able to say, well, I think it might be this, but they can't really do that because they have to look and find out it could be a million different things. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So you write for CNN Money. What are your predictions for AI next year? What are you going to be looking out for? What are you excited about writing about next year?
I am going to be keeping my eye on this sort of bias in systems. I think it's really interesting that, I feel like we're finally sort of recognizing these different biases. There's been a ton of research that came out this year that we're really going to be like investigating further. And I think too, not only that, but like the different industries that it's being used in. So artificial intelligence in healthcare is a huge one. But how is artificial intelligence going to be used in law enforcement? How is AI going to be used in education, or these different ways? And then you have all of the privacy and security factors that go into that as well. So if you're sharing your health data with a bot, or if law enforcement is using artificial intelligence to, for instance, make predictions on people who are going to prison, or there was a really interesting paper that Facebook put out that Facebook could recognize the difference between a protester and a police officer. So what are the implications to that? And it's not to say that Facebook can identify every single protester that during a state of emergency or something, but it does open those doors for those potential what ifs. Like if Facebook is capable of identifying between a protester and a police officer, what else is it capable of? What are some of the other companies building, and what role could that play in our civil society?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Selena, thank you so much for joining us. Selena's work can be found at money.cnn.com and Selena Larson on Twitter. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Selena.
Take
Happy
care.
New Year.
You too.
Other trends in AI this year included sharing information and beginning to think about whether AI can be hacked and used as a weapon. Dave Gershgorn spent the year researching these topics and others as a reporter for Popular Science and Quartz. Welcome back to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a piece that you wrote recently about communicating with AI. Now, I use Google Photos to search through my enormous photo library by keyword. I didn't tag anything. It's awesome. Google's massive AI scans and brings up pictures of Christmas trees or weddings or my dog. But sometimes the photo Google comes up with makes absolutely no sense at all. Tell us about the recent research that helps AI explain to us why it makes the decisions it does in a language that we can understand.
Yeah, so basically the way that image recognition works right now is there's the algorithm has to be trained on what a cat is, what a dog is, what a specific person is. And it does that by building these what they call internal representation. So it's basically that it builds its own way of thinking about images. So that is it's basically what it looks like is a long string of numbers, and it's a multi-dimensional vector, a lot of math, basically a mathematical equation that represents what these ideas are. And since they are for machines by machines, it's really difficult for humans to understand and read. So when your Google Photos gives you something that you don't necessarily understand why it's there, the engineers would have to go back and kind of parse through all those numbers, kind of reverse engineer the algorithm to see exactly why that one specific example went wrong. Now, this research does something pretty cool where it kind of interrupts it in the middle. It's almost as if the algorithm was taking notes as it went along and runs a second image recognition and kind of identifies the key areas that makes the algorithm determine that it's a dog or a cat or whatever it is, and converts that into text. So when you can actually ask it a question, the researchers or whoever is running it, why did you say that this is a dog or a cat? And they could say, well, it had 2 ears, it had a little nose, had some whiskers, and that's just something that we haven't been able to do before because it's all just been obscured in long strings of numbers or something like that.
One question that I have is about kind of how AI is reaching its conclusions. I mean, basically based on the way AI works, as compared to like modern, like regular, normal, let's say, computing, is that AI is really kind of programming itself. And you, as a programmer or as a computer engineer, you have very little insight into how it reaches that determination as a technology. As AI becomes more pervasive, is there any potential threat kind of involved with that sort of method of creating its code behind the scenes and not having that sort of transparency to be able to look into it and see how it reaches its determinations?
Well, I think that's why this kind of work is so important. Ever since we started using the first computers for anything larger than we could do on a single piece of paper, the scale of computing kind of expanded past the human brain. And this is just kind of the ultimate extension of that. This is the computers being able to make decisions on a level and a scale far beyond anything we can comprehend. And right now, we need computers' help to understand them. And as these artificial intelligence algorithms start getting put into things that are more critical, like banking, high-speed trading, anything that involves people, money, self-driving cars, they need to be explainable and accountable and ethical. And actually, in the White House report that came out yesterday, was the second report in this series that the White House is doing. They stressed that we need to understand how these algorithms work in case they go wrong, in case a self-driving car crashes. They need to be able to be interrogated. Kind of like anybody else would. Agency kind of comes with a price, and that's that you have to explain yourself and explain your decisions.
Well, that's something we've seen, like in the Tesla, the first fatal Tesla accident. Yeah. We were able to see, or even the little fender benders that happened before that, where someone says, "Well, I was just doing this," and then Elon Musk came back and said, "Actually, your car told us that this is what you were doing." And with the fatal accident, it was the same way. We could see exactly what happened. There was a record. It wasn't a he said, she said sort of situation. At the end of your piece that we were just talking about, you throw this out like, well, it's all well and good until the algorithms learn how to lie. Now, is that something that, as an artificial intelligence reporter, is that something that you or that we should be worried about?
I think that it's something that has been researched, and there have been, little algorithmic experiments where they learn to lie to each other for one reason or another. Or, this is also something in encryption. Like an algorithm needs to learn how to obscure its own information to to protect it. So there are use cases for where lying is important. And the only kind of situation that I can see where lying would kind of happen organically is that kind of that singularity idea of kind of some sort of malicious general AI that the morphed out of the ether. So it's not something that you're actively concerned about, but it's something that the research is being done, and if somebody, even if it wasn't a general AI, or maybe if it was somebody who wanted to maliciously put something together with all this open source code, it's something you have to think about. You have to think about everything. That's kind of the tale of 2015, is that everything is suddenly possible and nothing is kind of insane. We have self-driving cars on the road. We have a plethora of open source technologies. There was a paper that came out, and another one where people were applying facial recognition software to kind of bring back phrenology, where they said they can predict criminals with it. And it's something where that's just fringe research, but it kind of shows that this kind of software and technology in the wrong hands can be made to do some pretty bad stuff. And that's why the ethics and the accountability and kind of transparency in developing these systems is so important.
The whole aspect of AI lying, as an intent or something, I don't know, that's something I hadn't really considered before. But when you really think about a lot of what we've seen from AI, kind of creative output from AI this year, a lot of it has been just that. It's been feed AI a million shots of dogs, and then tell the AI to show me a poodle, and it creates one. This is the second time in this show that I mentioned the dog poodle, by the way. I'm not a poodle fan, so that's really strange. Anyways, so it's all, kind of around this idea that AI can create dynamically this thing that didn't exist before. And to the human eye, it becomes more and more difficult, I have to imagine, over the course of however many years, to trust what you see and trust what you hear and trust what you think when so much is possible in that regard.
Yeah, and there was some really interesting research that came out a little earlier this year that specifically was able to map a kind of a human face, and they could, and given a mouth input, me talking in front of a webcam, they could map my mouth and my facial expressions and the way my jaw moved. Maybe not mine because I have a beard and it's kind of messy, but to Donald Trump or to Alec Baldwin or to some other public official, and that's kind of going to be the fake news of the future. It's not somebody some fake quote, but it's a fake news clip, and where they've synthesized somebody's voice and face, and that's what you see on going viral on YouTube or on Twitter, and it's completely fabricated and almost indetectable.
Yeah, so I guess trust no one is
like this. Yeah, we talked about this
like
recently.
That.
Yep.
James Vincent, very good.
Yeah, you're right. There's no beards there. Oh, yeah, no, there is one beard, but not,
Yeah.
I think,
But the beards always look a little wonky.
Yeah.
They'll get there. They'll get there.
Oh, yeah, I have no doubt.
So now it's going to be use encryption, change your passwords often, and grow a beard in order to protect
No, it'll
yourself.
be record yourself 100% of the time so you can prove at that particular moment you didn't actually say that thing that video has you saying.
Yeah.
Active
I don't
surveillance.
like this future at all.
I don't like it either.
Well, you have also been covering OpenAI since its inception. It's been a little over a year. Explain a little bit about who founded OpenAI and how it's evolved over the past year.
Yeah, so it's one of those research shops that I keep pretty close tabs on because it has a lot of money behind it. It was, kind of co-founded by. I mean, the money comes from Elon Musk and from Sam Altman, but also from Peter Thiel and a bunch of other investors, like Amazon Web Services behind them. And they have a bunch of, corporate partnerships. And they have been grabbing some really great research talent from all across, from, their research director comes from Google, and some people that I have followed come from kind of all over the industry, and they're exploring the big problems like can we find if there is some malicious AI manipulating the internet, how would we find that? That's one of their big research problems. They just released this kind of big software that lets AI kind of control a computer the way a human would. So you can teach it to play almost any video game or, input text or code. So they are really kind of pushing the research barriers, but they're dedicated. And I think this is its creation is a trend in the field. It's all open software. So they're publishing all their code when it's done. They're creating open tools for researchers, and this is kind of another tale of 2016, where it's like the year that kind of openness and the researchers, the academics, won. Where Facebook and Google and DeepMind and OpenAI are all open sourcing their image recognition software, their text understanding software, 3D environments, and tools. So like the one on the screen right now, they're one of the researchers at OpenAI, Ian Goodfellow, has been doing a lot of work on adversarial examples, and that's kind of a word for data that would force an AI algorithm to do something wrong. So a crude example, possible in the future, is you slap a QR code on somebody's back, and a self-driving car would go right through them. It wouldn't see them at all. So they released a kind of first pass at a tool to make sure your AI algorithm isn't susceptible to these adversarial attacks, and if it is, it helps train against that. So they've been doing a lot of super interesting work, and I think they're just kind of getting started. They've been hiring a lot of people. They've been setting their research goals, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do in 2017.
Well, it's amazing that they've thought of all of those things, and they need to be thinking about those kind of types of things, because we hear about just recently Uber, there was a flaw in their algorithm that they admitted to in their self-driving taxis, where they were I guess doing right hook turns wrong into the bike lane and endangering cyclists. So is it a matter of real world, practice? And when it comes to self-driving cars, do you see like a danger in that? Because we can't test self-driving cars unless they're really out on the road. But it's very different than testing AI in Google Photos and making horrible mistakes, like misidentifying a gorilla as an African American person. That was horrible.
Which happened this year.
Yes, which happened this year or last. That was horrible, but no cyclist got run over with a car in the process.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of what Google DeepMind is really focused on, which is Alphabet's kind of AI research lab, and they are super focused on testing AI in games, and so they did a lot of the early work, beating Atari games, and they of course had the very publicized win over Lisa Doll with AlphaGo in the Go game, and now something that they just released earlier this month was this entire 3D environment that AI agents can explore. They've also been doing some stuff on like the game Doom, which is kind of creepy because it's like this AI gunning people down.
Right.
But their idea is that if you first test AI in a 3D environment and it can learn to navigate a world and it can learn to look around, avoid danger, not knock into things, then it'll be a pretty good analogy for when you set this thing in the real world. If you can simulate a world, it can kind of work in the real world. And there's been some proof that can happen. There was a paper that came out last month where the researchers they built this kind of 3D world for a drone to fly through, and it was kind of like a virtual drone. And then they put that same algorithm in a real drone, and it was able to fly around with like amazing accuracy and like go down hallways and everything like that. So it was kind of the virtual world is compatible to the real world. It's just a matter of getting it to the level where you're comfortable that it can navigate, and then testing it without any chance of people being harmed. I don't know. I mean, it's something where nobody has gotten hurt yet in a self-driving Uber, but there are other self-driving cars on the roads. Maybe that's something that we should be looking at. I mean, so Uber has like this intense research group behind it. So does Google. But I mean, what about the other? Didn't the state of California say that there are 20 other companies that are testing self-driving cars? Like, I'm more concerned about like the startup that's using like bootstrapped open source technology to, that they might not have the most rigorous testing capabilities, and they're putting self-driving cars on the road because they filed a $150 permit. Uber I don't think is kind of like the biggest concern right now. Because they do have such they have so much to lose. I mean, if they, God forbid, kill somebody with one of these things, I mean, it's humongous versus kind of like a startup that doesn't have, tens of billions of dollars that they kind of have on the line. I mean, it's a tragedy no matter who gets hurt and by what. But kind of just speaking as in the general idea of who has more to lose, it's Uber.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that idea of fooling the machine. You wrote an excellent PopSci piece on this. Talk a little bit about, I guess, what some people are calling AI hacking, just the ability to trick it for malicious purposes.
Yeah. So this has been demonstrated in a few things, in audio and in images, and basically these researchers, one of the kind of the biggest ones that's looking into it is Ian Goodfellow from OpenAI. They found that the algorithm kind of relies on about 4% of the pixels of an image to tell what it is and to make a decision. And those, I mean, it's more than 4%, but there's a crucial 4%. And he found that if you can alter those, then you can that would be imperceptible to the human eye, and it would trick the algorithm into classifying a school bus as a duck or something like that. So it has all these implications in terms of, self-driving cars, in terms of facial recognition, guarding a building or something like that, check scanners, anything that uses a camera and some sort of AI to identify somebody could be potentially hacked if you have certain knowledge of the algorithm being used. Another one, which is potentially a little bit more disconcerting, is that there was a group that was able to do this with audio, and I think there's a sound on that in that article, but it plays like white noise. It just sounds like and it can activate either Siri or the Google Assistant. At the time it was Google Now, and it could make it go to a website or execute a command or something like that. So the researchers were saying that one of the attack vectors is you play this noise on NPR and suddenly, 10,000 phones are going to malware.com. And it's all because these things are based on artificial intelligence algorithms that haven't really thoroughly been vetted as an attack vector for hackers. It just seems, it's just something that people haven't really thought about. It's so new and it's being rushed into products because that's kind of the best way to deliver value. But it's something that we need to be looking at and making sure that we understand before it gets exposed to people and before, people are able to force our phones to kind of work against us.
It seems like fitting to be the last story. Tell us about the glasses that you wrote about that are able to steal your face.
Yeah. So your precious face is no longer yours. It kind of goes on the same idea. When in facial recognition, kind of that big 4% that I was talking about earlier is mostly around kind of this area. It's like your eyes and your brow. So the researchers at Carnegie Mellon figured that if they had sunglasses, it would kind of do the same. It would cover that and be able to obscure it. So that pattern that you see on the glasses actually is enough data when viewed through a camera to swap my face or the researcher's face with, Scarlett Johansson or Carson Daly or anybody. So as long as the facial recognition was trained to identify that person. So it kind of shows, and this is a real world example. You could do this. They tested it with a very popular facial recognition algorithm, and it's this thing where if that algorithm was used in some sort of like building security, and you walked up with these glasses, it would be tricked. Like that's it. So it's a very real possibility that these things can be attacked and made to do the wrong thing. And it kind of goes to show that I think the larger point for people who might not be super interested in, how algorithms work, they just want it to work, is that these things aren't as smart as we think they are. They're just kind of drawing a best fit line through some data. It's a bunch of math that is no more kind of sentient or conscious or willing or able to catch its own mistakes than your keyboard, your iPhone, a typewriter. We're not at any level where you need to worry about AI yet. You need to worry about it messing up or being dumb enough to be tricked before you worry about it taking over the world.
A lot to worry about and not worry about.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Dave Gershgorn is a reporter at Quartz. That's QZ.com. He's Dave Gershgorn on Twitter. Read his pieces to be scared or to not be scared.
Hopefully the latter.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Always a pleasure. Appreciate
Take
it.
care.
All right, hopefully your brain isn't mashed up with all of the good and the bad from AI, but I mean, undoubtedly we've got a lot to look forward to in 2017. I'll be very curious to see how this kind of matures as we go into the next year. But like we've seen, like it's not just a 1 year at a time. Like this is extending far out beyond just what we're experiencing right now. I don't even know what the internet looks like at that point, like 5 years down the line with AI.
I don't know. I mean, I feel more positive, actually. I was joking about being scared, but I feel more positive that we have more good to look forward to. And I think I can protect myself just by growing a beard, and I'll be good.
There you go. That's not going to work for me because this is about as beardy as I get.
Oh, I can go.
You can go full beard.
Yeah.
TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. UTC at twit.tv/live. Live shows begin again next Monday. Though, Megan, you will not be with us for the first few days. You're still going to be enjoying your time away.
I sure am.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, whatever. When you get back, I'll assign everything to you. No, it's cool. Enjoy your time. But we will be back on Monday. I will anyways, with some great guests. You can be part of the show by emailing us at tnt@twit.tv. You can leave us a short voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW, and find us on Twitter at TechNewsTodayTV.
And you can find all the ways to subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNT. And if you're still with family and friends in the holidays, do them a favor, subscribe for them in there. Then they'll get just more and more presents every day, our presents. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Megan Morrone.
And I'm at Jason Howell. Thanks to our technical director, as always, Kara Cole. Thanks to Jammer B for helping out here in the studio, Kevin for editing everything, and thanks to you for talking tech with us today. Happy New Year. We'll see you on Monday. Bye, everybody. You almost forgot.